You're listening to a Sculpted Life podcast brought to you by Pal Tiya International. Interviews with creatives around the globe.
Welcome to Season 2 of A Sculpted Life podcast. I'm your host, Yvonne Anderson. In today's episode, Episode 5, I'm speaking with Ian Dorian. Ian's a visual artist and writer who creates stories and characters in the hero and animation genres. Some of the most famous creators today work alongside him on his various creations. His past clients include 20th Century Fox, Marvel Productions, and many more. He is also a sculptor and has worked with many mediums. When we first hopped on the call together, Ian wanted to tell me about how he's found working with Pal Tiya Premium, and we talk about this for a few minutes before we get into the actual interview. So we do hope you enjoy it. Please leave us a comment, review, and share this episode with any creative people in your life.
It's an exciting material. I mean, I've been following you for years now.
Yeah.
And I really love the product. I tried it out. I wish I had what I made from it, but a family member really loved it and asked for it. I would have loved to have shared it with you, but I really enjoyed working with the material.
Cool.
It just took a little getting used to for me because but that's every material. Like every time I try a new material, I just want to learn, like you said, the best way to utilize the material. What I really like about it is that it can then, once it gets, it starts off and it's malleable and I can manipulate it, and then it gets harder and then I can sand it and that's really good for me because I think you may remember I am a stone carver.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of like being able to make my maquette or bozzetto, like my model, and then being able to carve that like stone in a way. Certainly like filing it down, everything, and sanding it. And what I really love is that when I'm done, I can put it anywhere. Like I can have it indoors, outdoors, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's great as a material over other materials as well. So I had built like this small under armature out of just objects I had around just to build up the mass.
Yeah.
And it worked really well. I actually used recycled plastic containers.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Fill it, bulk it out with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And
nice.
I did that, and then I sealed it all, taped it all together, and then I used some wire that I wanted to use, and then I had the bulk of the form, and then model. And then what I really liked was as I could sand and file it, I could really get those like more fine details that I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's important to someone like me to get that nice finish, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had some people over Christmas went to Kim's studio to play with it because they'd been using it, but they hadn't been doing anything kind of big in it. And when they got in there, they did, I don't know if you've seen the Assyrian warhorse head that they did.
I've watched everything.
Yeah.
It's really great.
That's cool. So we haven't told anyone yet, but what we did with that was they used the scagliola technique in it. So she found that when she mixed oxides in different batches and then she stapled it on in different bits, and she didn't know how it would turn out. She had never used oxides with it like that before. And when she wet it, it went sort of like this uniform, sort of jade-looking greeny color. And then she took it out, and then when it dried, she went to seal it, and it just came out this beautiful jade color that just astounded her, and she was like, "I didn't even know it would do that." It looks amazing. It looks so good.
That's exciting for people like me and other people who really want to explore with new materials and see what we can get out of it. So I definitely have to say that product is its own kind of product.
Because it's not like anything that's on the market, and so people tend to look at it and they think, oh, it's just a clay, and so they just dismiss it as it's just another clay. And then when they actually, and that's why people have a lot of, we've been told that a few people had a bit of sticker shock when they looked at the price. They thought, how can it be that much for something? Because they thought you have to make the whole thing out of the product. And we said, no. Like the horse that we made is like literally that thin with product, and you could practically stand on it if you wanted to. It's so strong. But I think people forget that you don't have to use a lot of product. It's actually it lends itself to using it quite sparingly. Really, you're sculpting in the tinfoil, and this is just the coating that goes out, that makes it go outside in any weather.
What I also like about it is I could model it at pretty much any size. And I also like that even though there are other materials that you can model over aluminum and then say bake in an oven, they don't have the lasting ability and the outdoors. They don't have that at all compared to your material. You know, so I think that was also one of the challenges of creating it, and then the benefits of using it. It seems very successful as far as I'm concerned. And seeing the different artists, I've seen more and more artists challenge the material and challenge themselves with the material.
Yes.
And I can really see that material being so valuable even for set design and things like that. Especially, you know, as you mentioned, the involvement also comes from people from WETA, and WETA is always one of the greatest in the world for what they do. I'll tell you what, you know, I did my master's degree, and I was doing sculpture, and I knew lots of sculptors that needed to make pieces for outdoors and so forth, and a lot of pieces that were very, very large, and oftentimes they would build them out of a lightweight material because it's very hard to move. A solid object. But if you use foam glued together, cover it with aluminum or some other material, and then use your brand, the Premium brand, I'm sure a lot of those artists would be very happy. When we use the product, we use word of mouth. And word of mouth is the best way to sell a product, because it's essentially we're endorsing your product. We're sculptors. We sit in our rooms in our studio and we model clay and we think around and we talk to ourselves. And any opportunity to talk to people who are passionate about sculpture, people who are passionate about art making, you know. And there's something else about it, you know. One thing I really love about sculpture is having the products like what you have, and the idea that it's something I can hold in my hands, something I forever. Again, the permanency and the durability, I will say, of that material is very valuable. You know, other materials that you bake in an oven or so forth, those materials do deteriorate over time. They don't last very well. And your material is a much better material, doesn't need to be done that way, and can be made for super large objects and even small objects. So, I mean, I'm a big fan, to be honest, of the product, and I think I think the price point is perfect.
That's what I believe, but a lot of people still have a lot of sticker shock.
Well, they haven't, you know, as the product gets more and more out, you know, in a way, I being wanting it all for myself, I don't want everyone to know about it, but I do think as a responsible sculptor, more I should tell as many people as possible.
Do you know, you're not the first person that said that. So many people have contacted me and said, I don't want to tell anyone because I'm like, it's my secret sauce now and I can use it and I don't have. And she said I had to really battle that within myself to actually tell other people about it. And then I realized that I was being very unfair, because if I keep it all to myself, then maybe you won't be here one day and I won't be able to use it anymore. And she said, so then I started telling everybody about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how it is. So, but the great thing is, you know, the more of us use the material and enjoy the material, the more possible it is for us to discuss it, come up with new things we can do with it, et cetera, et cetera. So Well, that's my thoughts on that, definitely. Like I said, I think individual artists who have a special and specific voice, who wish to make public work.
Yes,
This could be a really life-saving and material for them.
Cool. I'm glad you think so. It's always nice to hear.
People have to get comfortable with new things.
Yeah.
And once they start figuring out, they start getting comfortable with it, then it takes off. And then it seems like overnight. So like you said, you're removing the kiln, you're removing all of that. I've worked with all those materials, you know, and I like all the different materials for different reasons.
Different purposes. Yeah.
So you'll see, like behind me, you probably see there's some those are oil-based clay figures.
Yeah.
But I'll work in terracotta. I've used your product. I've used I'll use foam. Sculptors should explore, and they should
absolutely
use a medium or the material that best suits the need.
Yes.
So there's a lot of need that can be satisfied with your material.
Yeah.
So you know, for me, I didn't know anything about any material when I started sculpting. I started also quite young. I probably started with the intent to actually sculpt, not just to move my Play-Doh around, but to actually make a sculpture. I think I started around 9.
9, wow. And what prompted that? What was it always in you, do you think?
I was a huge fan of classical art.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated by stone carving. I was fascinated by clay modeling. I saw it as a way to tell stories with people, even though it's not real people, but they kind of come alive. So I was really committed to learning about sculpture. Michelangelo's work was so powerful, and it was like these controlled figures, but they felt like the muscles wanted to explode, and the tension. Bernini's work inspired me. The dynamics of the Baroque period, the strong diagonals and so forth. I was just, I felt like I was in the moment, like it was happening around me, and I wanted to touch it. You know, I draw a lot. I draw for a living, actually, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I create, working in developing characters and worlds and concepts. But I really love working in clay or any kind of sculpting material or modeling material, so that I can kind of visualize these worlds or these people better. And so what I'll do is, not only will I do, and let's say I have character, and the character is going to be done in a traditional comic book fashion. I don't use references when I work in comic books, and there's a certain kind of visual language we use. But I'll also do that figure as an oil painting.
Okay.
And I'll use a live model, and I'll try to get a picture that I put on my wall so that I can see this as a real person and know who they are, like they live in this world. And then what I'll do is I'll make models, and I will model a bust or a figure, and I'll use that as a reference point for my work. As a matter of fact, a lot of my very good friends in feature film will do that, especially my friends over at Pixar. Pixar's really big on using the models and making models or figures, objects that the entire crew can look at, hold in their hand, touch. Mm-hmm. It's a sense that often people don't use because of the world of computers. Yeah. But it does inform the mind. It informs you in a different kind of way, and it truly helps you develop a sort of gestalt. So for me, making a three-dimensional object is extremely beneficial. Not only that, I think whenever teaching anyone, like a lot of my students who want to learn how to draw better, I tell them to sculpt. Okay. So And the reason why I tell them to sculpt is, when you do a drawing, gravity, you can defy gravity. You don't have to know what's working in the back to do the drawing from the front. But when you model or sculpt or carve, you're thinking about the front, the side, the back. You're thinking about gravity. So all of this becomes information that you store when you do a drawing or a painting. So whether you're working modern materials and digitally on a digital software that you draw or paint, working and sculpting will always inform your work. So,
I never thought about it like that. I never thought about the fact that, sketching in the 3D makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah, because when you do that, you develop an understanding of it in a way that's much more defined and clear. And so when people ask me, so how do your drawings look, they'll say to me often, your drawings look dimensional. And I tell them, well, I'm a sculptor. So I can see the back when I draw the front.
Yes.
I can visualize it. The mind is incredible what it can bring back from the crevices of its your memory or imagination. It comes forward when you need it, and when you're touching something, the memory of running your hand across a textured surface, the memory of your hand across a glossy or smooth surface. That helps to inform your drawing, because even though you're creating the illusion of it and you're not actually making it, you're actually able to create that illusion because you remember what it feels like.
Yes.
So I urge people to work in three-dimensional practice as much as they can to inform the drawing and painting.
Wonderfully said. And take me back, because I'm really interested, and I think people will be really interested. Take me back to 9-year-old you, when you have decided that you want to start creating figures. What journey did you go on? How did that begin? What did you start using?
Well, I use a lot of different materials. Like most kids, we use whatever's around us. So I kid you not, pun intended, I kid you not. I started with water and digging up the dirt and kind of making my mud pies and my mud figures. Sand, of course, making our little sand castles and things like that, like most everyone does. But then I went to a school for children in the science and arts at a very, very young age. I think I was around 8 or 9 when I went to the school. And they had this storage room of art materials. And I was like, I can't believe this. This actually exists. And there was wax, and there was clay and paper mache. And I said, can I use this? Can I use that? And nobody else was using it. So the instructor said, sure, whatever you want, use it. And it was probably the greatest gift that instructor could have given me was the freedom to explore different materials. Which, just as a side note, it's why I was saying trying your product was very good for me, because it allowed me to sort of look at my process differently and my results differently. And that's really important to the education of a sculptor or just a person to help them visualize. So anyway, so that's how I started using the material. And then I started copying other artists. I started copying Picasso and Michelangelo. Yes, I did non-objective or abstract sculptures. I tried my hand at realistic sculptures. But I'll tell you, fast forward jump straight to university. And my instructor, I brought in this very carefully modeled classical Baroque style figure And I showed it to him, and he looked at it, he smirked, and he says, well, you'll get no props from me for that. And I said, what do you mean? I mean, look at what I've done. He said, first, you must understand rhythm, repetition, large and small, patterns and shapes, textures, and how they relate, design. And when you understand these elements of art and you apply them in sculpture, you can then utilize them for your figurative work. So I stopped for about a year doing figurative work and just did non-objective or abstract work.
And what did that look like? What kinds of things did you do?
It was, most of it was in the style of Isamu Noguchi, Brancusi, and other sculptors like that. I even explored approaches like Eva Hesse. And then I got back to making figurative work. And I remember the repetition of patterns, the textures, the strong, bold shapes or forms with a message, and the subordinate forms that help support the design. And I utilized that in the figurative work. And it actually looked more like the classical Baroque work after that. Right. So I would say for anybody who wants to learn about sculpture, learn your materials, learn your tools, learn the basic elements of sculpture, line, texture, form, repetition, variation, these things. You can even explore color. Certainly texture is how we kind of do color in sculpture, because value and texture lend itself to the kind of experience that we have visually and tactily for identifying reality. You know, children touch things so much because it's a sense, it helps inform their mind about what we're experiencing. As we get older, we're taught not to touch things. Yeah. We're taught not to engage with objects or things or people. But the sense of touch is an important element in the development of both children and the maintenance and development and understanding of the mind in teens and adults. So, you know, I would urge anyone who wants to have strong developmental skills for their children, model and sculpt. Absolutely.
So the time between you finding out that you wanted to do this to the time you went to university, was it always part of your life in some way, shape, or form?
Oh yeah, I knew it since about 7. I started exploring around 9, and I never stopped. I just never stopped working in 3-dimensional materials. Many people will tell you that they're tactile, that the experience of touch is like no other experience. You know, if you think about it, I don't know about for other people, but certainly for me, I could go about my life next to people, near people, looking at people around me. But I never touch the walls in the supermarket. The people next to me, certainly I don't, and things like that. I know it's hilarious, but the truth is the sense of touch is so emotional and so experiential, and it truly becomes a memory. It informs our memories much better. And if I were to look at everything and never touch anything, what would be the major difference between experiencing it in actual reality or virtual reality? There wouldn't be much proof that I'm not experiencing either one or both at the same time. But when I touch things, it becomes incredibly personal, and it becomes incredibly real. Real in the greatest sense that humans can experience. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm committed to. Nice. Sculpture also is an exploration of light. when you're learning traditional sculpture or even modern sculpture, the exploration about form and scale in real space, light and how light hits surfaces and doesn't hit certain surfaces. What you can do if you just look at an abstract sculpture in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the night, and you'll see that the light changes the patterns and shapes that you experience when you look at it, and the lack of it, so the shadows. So I can guide the eye in a classical sculpture with the depth of a form or shape. So the convex or concave areas will create patterns of dark and light, value, or, and I can lead the eye through space, as Baccioni did in his sculptures, leading the eye around the sculpture, off the sculpture, and back into the sculpture. Again, these are, I don't want to get too heady or anything, so I'm keeping out some of the technical terms, but just I think it's clear what I'm saying.
And if you want to share more about the technical terms, I'm sure people listening would love to hear that as well. So don't be shy.
Well, maybe again in the future I'll get some sculptures. Why don't we do this again? And I'll probably have an abstract sculpture and a figurative sculpture, and then I'll describe and demonstrate, pointing out where, so people can see what I'm talking about. I'd be more than happy to do another session and let people come back for that. Please come back for this session and come back for the next session where I'll do that. I'll look at abstract and figurative sculpture. I'll have at least 2 examples, and then we'll walk around it. I'll turn it, I'll spin it. The important thing to do is to refer back to what I was saying earlier about, you see the front, but you're thinking about the back.
Yes.
So it's important that sculpture is dimensional and that you experience it as a dimensional object. So sculptures are meant to be interactive, even sculptures that don't move. You need to go around them. You need to experience them from the top, the side, the bottom.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, one thing that burns my bottom is when they take these beautiful sculptures and place them in the corner of a sculpture room in a museum. I don't mind it being in the museum. I'm glad that they take care of it. I'm glad they preserve it.
But let people walk around it.
Let people walk around it. When I was at the Academy in in Florence, and I was with my nephew and we were looking at Michelangelo's carvings, I know he was a lefty. I know his height. And I'm a stone carver. So I took my nephew to the back of the sculptures that are up against the wall. When you entered, there are a lot of the sort of inudi or bound figures or encased figures, sort of half hewn or half carved, as it were, out of the marble. And they line the walls as you walk through the center path towards the David. Well, those pieces to the right, I took my nephew and we went behind the work. And I stood there showing him, if I were a lefty and I were to carve, this is the direction Michelangelo used his chisel. This is how he had to stand in order to make this form and shape. Because this is the way you carve when you carve marble. And so I was able to show him, following the carved lines and indentations, I could literally, like a map, follow how he carved, in which stage and what process. It was as if he was there doing it. But you'd never learn that because people walk around past it.
Yeah.
They look at the front, the facade, or what have you, and then they keep going. But there's so much information behind the object. Not to mention any object that's meant to be seen. John Bologna was good for this, for doing pieces where you would walk to the front, the side, and the back, and the design spirals and moves. It's never the same. So that's why you want repetition and variation, and it's also why you want diagonals. Diagonals will move the eye up and down around the sculpture. And as you walk around, it seems to come alive and as if it's moving. And each part leads you to the next part.
I love sculptures like that.
Yes. And it's a design element to keep the experience. It's manifest in the memory, each individual part. And then when you're done, you have this vision of it moving in space.
And it just makes it come alive, in your mind.
Absolutely, in the mind. It's, in a way, it's like reading a book. It's words on paper. It's not people. It's not material. It's not weather. It's not temperature. It's not emotions. But when you read it, your mind visualizes and completes those ideas. So sculpture, even though it's an actual object, is actually telling its story in your mind. Do you understand? It puts all the different parts together. That's why I say I urge people to experience sculpture in the round, to walk all the way around it and experience it as much as possible.
So when you had been at university and you're studying this and someone told you to go back and do this and then come back and do your figure work after it, obviously that made your figure work so much deeper.
Well, no one told me.
Okay.
Yeah.
They
No
just
one
said
told me.
learn.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, most of my teachers were two-dimensional artists.
Right.
It's just a passion I had from the time I was a child. And I spent many years going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia, to the Philly Museum, and several other museums around the world. I've been to the Louvre and certainly the museums in the Academy and the Vatican in Rome, where I've lectured on the Vatican collection, actually. Oh, nice. And I've lectured on Rodin's work also, his life and his work. But visiting those places, I'll tell you a really great museum is in Washington, D.C. The National Museum has a tremendous amount of modeled objects. So that means not carved with a chisel and a hammer. That's actually sculpting. Working with materials where you build, that's the additive process.
Yes.
And stone carving is the subtractive method or subtractive process. So you will find a lot of additive process or additive materials and sculptures being shown at the National Museum in Washington, D.C. It's really a great collection. Yeah.
So you left university, and then what happened?
Well, that was yesterday. No, no, hardly. All my troubles seem so far away. Anyway, no, I left university, and then I almost immediately, even while I was a university student, I was an assistant professor. Okay. So for figure drawing, anatomy, and sculpture. So I ended up teaching in many colleges and universities or being a guest critic at some schools like Parsons School of Design. And certainly I taught at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Then I got accepted without really applying. Nobody get angry with me. I went to the School of Figurative Art in New York City, and I just graduated with my bachelor's degree. And I had a wax figure I had modeled the night before, and I knocked on the door. And the director was David Davidson at the time, and David Davidson, if anyone knows, incredibly tall person. Okay. Like a very kind, wonderful man, extremely tall. He could have had a career in the NBA. In any event, he met with me, and I said, I know it's probably late to apply. I haven't filled out any paperwork, but I just wanted to see your school. And he says, well, come on in. And then he says, well, what is that in your hand? I said, oh, it's a wax model. He said, when did you do that? I said, last night. He said, you did this last night? I said, yes. He said, come in my office. So I went in his office, and I'm going to just speed it up. He showed me around. He showed me the graduate students that had applied and that were accepted. And then he told me he'd call me in about 2 days. He called me and he said, we know you haven't applied yet, but we're going to accept you. We're going to give you a scholarship, and we're going to make room for you. We're going to move around the studios to make room for you.
Nice.
What an amazing thing. I mean, I carried around this little clipping from their advertisement in the Sculpture magazine for about a decade before I went and did that. Now I'm accepted, I think, yes. The only thing was I wanted to carve marble.
Right.
And they did not carve. They did not do the subtractive method at the time. They did the additive method. So I said, well, where can I do the subtractive method? And David said, Pietrasanta in Tuscany. I said, Pietro, what? So he said, Pietrasanta. So, well, I went. I went to Pietrasanta. I worked in a marble carving studio. I studied under Mirio Viviani and Bruno Bresciani. I learned a lot of techniques very quickly. I worked off of a clay model, a wax model that I had, maquette that I had designed. Of course, the night before I showed up.
I see a theme here.
Well, I got there. I couldn't bring a big thing of full materials with me on the plane, or at least I didn't think I could. So as soon as I got to the town, I just looked for a way to get the material. I found it the day I arrived. I modeled a figure that evening. I woke up in the morning, went to the studio, and started learning how to carve.
And how old were you at this time?
I would think I was 7. No, I'm just.
Oh, this was just yesterday.
I was 11. No, I think I was around 26.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so I was probably around 26, or 27, and I mean that was it for me. There I was. As a matter of fact, I had an opportunity because another sculptor who was a student of one of my maestros, my teachers, was modeling the coins for the Vatican in Rome for the year 2000. So I walk into his studio, and who is he on the phone with? The Papa, the Pope.
Jeez.
So I'm like, wow, I'm in my 20s. I grew up in the city, and here I am surrounded by stone carvers and clay modelers, and this guy's on the phone with the Pope talking about modeling the coins for the millennium. Yeah. It actually happened. I did it. And I have to say, after that, I spent many years instructing. And then I started working for companies. I backtracked just very quickly. And I worked for toy companies doing models for displays, for presentation displays for shows and things like that, before and while I was in college for these toy in New York City, Hong Kong. And then these days, I spend most of my time taking on just a few commissions a year. With my workload, I literally cannot get enough done. And I'm very blessed by that. But when I get commissions for sculptures, I'll usually take them. Yeah. Because it's a real pleasure to go back and get to do the thing I really, really enjoy. You know?
Yeah. Well, it lights you up. Yeah.
That's for sure.
So how long were you in Italy? Were you there for a while, or was it just?
Well, I would have to say collectively years, but always within increments of 1 month to 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, return for work and things like that.
Yeah.
Or for lecturing in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And then return again in the summers and so forth.
Nice.
But collectively, I've been going back and forth since that time for 20 years. Yeah. So I would definitely say it's a few years worth of life in Italy, experiencing the culture and doing the work. So.
And what's life like in Italy compared to the US?
For an artist,
it depends on who you ask, right? But I would say that I've been in South America, and they do something. It's a phrase. Cogelo suave. It's like you take it easy, you know. And they have a nice even pace about a life in certain parts of South America where I've been and done extensive stay. And then the U.S., of course, is run, work, add some extra work and running to your running and working. If you were to take the two and combine them, you'd probably get a good example of what it's like to be in Italy. And most regions of Italy, you see the old world and the new world. You know, in a lot of countries, certainly in the U.S., you don't see something that's thousands of years old right next to something that's very modern. So your experience about the world is different.
And did that impact your work that you did there? Did it impact your work in the long run?
I would say yes. I would say that it always keeps me thinking about the past and the future, the present and the future. I'm always remembering and reflecting on that. And honestly, I'm always learning from it. So every time I go past a sculpture, whenever I'm staying in Rome, I've passed a sculpture 1,000 times, but I see it a little differently because I change. We all change as we age, change the way we perceive the world, change the way we experience it. And so it's different for me every time because I'm different. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what I was talking about the other day to someone about how, you know, our experience of life changes the way we view things. It could be a woman's time of the month and she might be like, I hate it, you know. And as you grow and change as well, your experience of life is very, very impacts what you see.
I'm a man, obviously, or maybe not so obvious, I don't know. But at this point in the way that I define myself as a man, and I will tell you that we have a time of the month, and it usually starts on day 1 of the month and it ends on the last day of the month. So I apologize to all the women who have to
turn into monsters.
With our time of the month is literally every day of the month. I have 4 sisters, and I love them dearly, and I appreciate them. I appreciate them very much.
I feel sorry for you 3 sisters. Wow.
Well, actually, it's 4, and
4.
no, I'll take on more. I love my sisters dearly.
Oh, that's so good.
They're 4 of the best things that ever happened in my life. Aww. I really love them.
Do you have any brothers?
Yeah, I have an identical twin brother. He's 5 minutes older.
You did tell me that,
Yeah, he's 5 minutes older. He's a professional artist. He's an exceptional, amazing artist, amazing creator. He creates stories and characters and that many other artists and writers work on. He's worked with the big companies, DC Marvel. He's worked with the Carpenters, John Carpenter, the filmmaker. He's worked for corporations. I've done similar, but my brother has been very prolific. My eldest brother is a tile setter, and he owns an artisan's company as a craftsman with tile. He does beautiful crafted work.
So that's interesting that you're all into that art in some way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Even my sisters that never really pursued the art as a career all demonstrated an aptitude and interest and passion for it.
And do your parents as well? Is that where it came from, do you reckon? Or?
Well, I don't know about my mom. I lost her when I was very young. Not about, I mean, I know her, but I knew her, but I didn't know her as an artist. But I definitely knew her as a passionate and loving person. She was incredibly passionate. My father was an artist. He was born and raised in southern France.
Okay.
And he went to art school. He went to school and did art. He had an aptitude and propensity for operatic singing. But he was a draftsman. He was a very, very, very good draftsman. Very young age. I saw drawings of his when he was 3 and 4. My grandmother showed me. We were Armenians. We were children of the diaspora. And so that's why my father was born in France, in Marseille. But at a very young age, everybody thought my father would be the next Picasso. He could draw a hat on a head at 3 years old. Like it looked like it sat on the head. Very few people can perceive that at that age. I mean, it's almost unheard of. Even when my father was ill before he passed, he had Alzheimer's.
Okay.
But the one thing he never forgot was the thing that was, I think, almost innate. So he was looking at my sculpture work, a large piece I was doing, life-size. And I was a professor, I was a lecturer, and my friend comes into the area where I'm working and he says, change that foot, fix that fold. Now he had his Alzheimer's for quite some time. And yet this he did not forget. This is something about the human mind and its ability to perceive. It made me wonder if there's a way to tap into the mind even at that period or stage in one's illness. And what areas are that active, and how can those be utilized to stimulate the mind for memory and so forth?
Absolutely. And you find that when people start losing their mind, they remember things from way, way back in their past, like when they were small children, and they don't remember what happened 5 minutes ago.
Well, certainly it's where the memories and ideas and thoughts are stored. Well, certainly it's where the memories and ideas and thoughts are stored. And the activity of the synapses of the brain, et cetera, in that region of the brain. But not to get technical, but I do think that there's something about that. There's something where, once again, this was sculpture, where it stimulates the mind in a different way.
And what do you hope to achieve with your work? When someone looks at your work, how do you want them to perceive it?
Oh, that's an easy one. But it took me a lifetime to figure it out. I don't want people to look at my sculpture as a sculpture.
Okay.
I want them to look at it as a moment in the events or lives of that object or that person I'm depicting, if it's a figurative work, I mean, in particular. So if it's abstract, certainly as an object, I'd love, but I don't model or draw or sculpt to make people recognize the forms. I don't think about the accuracy, even though I've developed a good skill with that. I think about the emotion or the experience of the moment. And if I can capture that, no matter whether it's abstract, realistic, semi-realistic, caricature, if I can capture the emotion, what's going on inside, underneath, because human beings are just like that. And Shakespeare's talked about that. You know, all the world is a stage and we are just actors upon it. Well, underneath that actor's mask is the true self. And so I look for the true self in the object. So that it no longer remains an object, but in the mind of the viewer, it becomes a person, a thing, as they are. And it imbues the space with a life that emerges like a golem from the clay into a living being.
Yeah, and that's when I look at sculpture, I'm always moved by movement in a sculpture. When I can see it's as if they've just stopped at a moment in time. And, you know, if there's like a skirt kind of swishing, or there's, you know, clothes that are clinging to the body in a certain way, it's almost like you can read a whole lifetime in that one piece of a sculpture.
That's the point. Yes, and I think a lot of people miss that. The sculpture is it's the part that you can see of what's happening.
Yeah.
So when I model busts, my figures, I see the entire figure, and you're just getting the detail of the bust.
Yeah.
Like a photograph of a moment in time from the chest up or shoulders up. That's all you're seeing, but you know there's a lot more going on. So I'm always looking for that story that can be told. Every object is a story in and of itself. And so whether it's abstract, non-objective, figurative, you're telling a story. You're communicating. So look for the story in your work, and people will always connect to it.
Nice. And what inspires you to create? Like, is it so some people have told me that it's nature, or some people have told me it's what's happening in their life, or a picture that they've seen that just suddenly sticks in their head, and then it compels them to start creating. What inspires you as a maker?
To be honest, everything you just mentioned, all of the above.
Yeah.
No, we're human beings. We're capricious and fickle, flappable and fallible. So I can't even tell you one moment to the next what would inspire me for my own personal work. That could be the wind. It could be something I ate that I really love the taste of. It could be something I smell. It could be a moment that I remember or that I'm living in. But I can tell you what inspires me to do the kind of work I usually do, which is figurative work. And which is funny because most of my favorite work is abstract art.
Okay.
Barbara Hepworth is one of my favorite sculptors.
Okay.
Definitely, without a doubt, because she was incredible. And to do what she did during the time that she did it, with the responsibilities and family that she had, you just have to be overwhelmed by her, like by her skill, her sense of simplicity and her exploration. It really stunning.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes. And most people who see my work, superheroes, science fiction, robots and superheroes, like I said, would never imagine that. Like some of my favorite artwork is Baccioni and Barbara Hepworth.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sort of like the rap star or the rock star that goes home and listens to jazz or blues.
Yeah.
You could totally see it and understand that it's the same thing for me.
Okay.
You know, I'm so inspired by people who think differently from me and who can do things in a way that I haven't thought of. It really, that motivates me. So to answer your question, my motivation oftentimes is not work that's similar to my own. It's actually the work that's different.
Warm up that light. And so I know that you're saying that doesn't inform your work because you're looking at it, but does it inspire you to copy, like not copy, but does it inspire you to make things like that? Or do you put that knowledge of what that person has done in that sculpture into your own work in some way? Or does it just excite you to look at it and it doesn't inform your work at all?
It was the latter. It was it inspires me to think about how to utilize that within my own work.
Okay.
So I don't mind copying. Copying is a very good way to get out of your headspace and get into someone else's headspace and you're always left a slightly better version of yourself for it. So I have nothing wrong with copying or emulating to learn. But you do have an individual voice.
Yes.
And your voice is usually your own experiences and your own reflection, introspection, and it comes out in your work. And then the things you've experienced and learned from others. So an amalgamation, if you will, of all of it. So when I make my work, I think about the artists that are abstract artists that focus on certain elements, or De Suvero and others, like just looking at their work, scale, looking at pieces that are enormous and walking through and around them can really inspire me, because when I'm drawing or sculpting or modeling a figure, I might try to make them feel small compared to their environment, or make them feel large, even if it's not a large object, I want it to feel large or feel small.
So is it fair to say, from what you've just said, that there's never a time when you've felt creatively blocked, or have you ever gone through a period of, I just don't feel inspired to make anything?
Yeah, it's called daily life. I can tell you that, to answer your question, first of all, yes, I go through blocks often. But I do something one of my instructors suggested. It wasn't a mystery, but it was still good to hear again when I was in graduate school. And he said, work through your problem, work through your confusion, work through your doubt. So essentially it falls back down to working. So when you can't work. When eventually you'll break through that barrier, and you will start making more sense of what it is you're doing, and those visual blocks, those mental blocks will go away. They literally will.
And do you find that?
Oh, definitively. Oh yeah. We call it everyone calls it getting in the zone. So if you want to be in the zone, you don't always get in the zone in 2 seconds.
Straight away, yeah.
There are days when you do. You can wake up in the zone. And then there are days when you just don't wake up in the zone. That's why technique is important. Sure, you can draw anything you want and it's art, sure. Okay. But informed work that's supported by strong technique will allow you to create and get through that difficult time and into the zone. It'll help you when you're not in the zone, when you're not there emotionally. The technique will help you.
And did you ever have any moments of, because a lot of people tell me, I hear from creative people every day, and a lot of people tell me that there's a real fear that they won't be good enough they won't be able to translate what's in their mind into a sculpture that they can be proud of. What would you say to those people? Because I'm sure you've probably been there at some point in your life where you've had an idea and you've tried to make it happen, and perhaps it's not come out the way that you want it to. What advice would you give to those people?
Oh yeah, so last night that happened. That's a daily occurrence.
Okay.
Number one, if we could all get out what we saw in our minds accurately all the time, we'd probably even be greater than Michelangelo. Because I'm willing to bet that Michelangelo, under his breath, not in front of anyone, was thinking, it's not what I really wanted. I envisioned something greater.
Yeah.
So the comfort comes in knowing that you will never get rid of that feeling.
Nice.
Okay.
So that's good. It's good to know that, because a lot of people feel that I should be over this by now. I should be, I'm at the point where I should be creating all the time and be fantastic, and I think to myself, it's a never ending journey. You will always be going from times when things will be beautiful and bountiful, and then other times when it's just going to be completely broken and shit.
Yes. Well, you have to keep in mind that the better you get, and it's incremental, and it's very silent. So the better you get over time, the more demanding you become. The more demanding and better you get, the less satisfied you are with your previous work. So the problem doesn't get solved, it gets harder because you're constantly improving and then constantly looking back at your work, even the work you were satisfied with before, and looking back in it dissatisfied. There are occasions where you can say, that was pretty good. I was in the zone. But there'll be few and far between. And pretty much everybody, even after they're successful, deep down inside feels like an imposter. Like they not everyone, but most. Like, am I really this person? Am I really this good? Am I really good at all? And it's actually the people who question that every day, or let's rephrase, it's actually the people who try to improve every day that usually are the best people. And we all feel this way. As a matter of fact, the more successful we become by way of recognition, pay, how prolific we are with our work, or how many kudos we get around the world, no matter what, like I said, it in some ways doesn't disappear. It actually could get greater, that feeling that are really the person.
Yeah, because you've worked for some big companies, haven't you? You've done work for.
Sure, worked for Marvel. I worked for 20th Century Fox. I worked for Fox Media. I worked for a lot of companies, big and small, toy companies as well. I was a toy sculptor. I was a director and advisor on toy lines. I've sculpted for museums. I showed in museums with my modern art in modern art museums. But I can tell you that, you never get over that feeling that you're just not 100% there. You're just. And so you just keep trying and trying, and that's exciting.
That's the journey. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And if I can close with this, I would say, when you're on a ladder, and the ladder is very high and very long and very, very far, and you take another step up the ladder, you haven't achieved your goal. You haven't gotten there, and it still looks very far away. But you are in the right direction, on the right path. Even though it seems like that moment was a failure every step, because you didn't reach the top with the next step. It isn't a failure, because those unsuccessful attempts to reach the top immediately will ultimately lead you to the top of that ladder.
That's a beautiful, beautiful way to look at it, isn't it? It's because then you're always going to be trying to get better yourself, but feeling like you're always going to be taking a step closer to it, no matter how, as long as you don't stop creating.
Correct. Exactly.
Don't stop forever. Just keep.
Don't stop.
Like you said, just keep going, and you'll get there.
And to put it in a less eloquent, less metaphoric way, okay? If you stink in the beginning, but you do it every day, eventually you stink less. And then you get a little better and a little better until you're pretty good. And ultimately, you become that person, whether you were that person in the beginning or not. So there's no bad result, And you don't need to be that amazing talent in the beginning. You just need to keep doing it. You will become that person. I would say, if you want to be a good sculptor, think about sculpture when you're not sculpting.
Yeah.
Scientists have proven recently, that if someone imagines and thinks through the process, even though they're not actually doing the activity, when they go back to the activity, they've actually improved.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, connect your life to your work and your work to your life. Take your experiences and see where you can utilize them, good or bad or indifferent, into your work and vice versa. And you will find that that will allow you to be that artist you want to be, even when you're not making art. And I'll probably close with that because that's pretty good.
That's pretty awesome.
I can't thank you enough for having me on this show and
Thank you.
and being a part of it. It's really a wonderful part of my day today is to do that.
Oh,
And
thank you.
actually now I'm like super motivated to go and do my work, and make something really great, which I'm going to think tomorrow is, what is that?
What was I thinking?
What was I thinking? It was amazing yesterday.
You can find Ian at his website, www.iandorianart.com, and on Instagram his handle is @IanDorian. You can see all his work there. Thanks for listening. Please leave us a review on iTunes, comment on our YouTube channel if you're watching this in video format, and let us know how you're finding these episodes. Also, if you or anyone else you know would like to be featured on A Sculpted Life and they've got a story to tell, then send them our way by emailing us at sculpting@paltiya.com.
If you want to know more about Pal Tiya and our amazing product, Pal Tiya Premium, then visit www.paltiya.com and join our international fan base.